Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are here at the LinkedIn Collective Live studio from Cannes at the International Festival of Creativity. It's the 70th anniversary this year, and I am so excited to be joined by Taj, Val, and Dan, and we're going to have a conversation about basically what everyone's talking about here at the conference. Like in all of our lives, everyone's talking about generative AI, everyone's trying to figure out what it means for life and work. And it is absolutely the topic of conversation here in Cannes. So I'm so thrilled to have you here and just to bring to life a little bit about what everyone's talking about and what we're seeing and how marketers all over the world can figure out how to figure out what's real, what's not real, how do they put it into their work, how do they prepare for what really feels like a complete shift in how work gets done. So anyway, why don't we start with intros? Why don't we start with you, Taj?
Oh yeah, sure. So Taj Reid, Global Chief Experience Officer at Edelman, where I oversee creative technology and design. We build experiences that help our clients, connect more deeply with their audiences in really impactful ways, just building that trust. So yeah, Taj.
Love that. Cool. Val?
Hi, I'm Val Vacante, VP Solutions Innovation at Dentsu. I'm very fortunate that my role is all about creating new products, productized services, experimenting with new technologies, and ultimately helping businesses create what's next. So we'll talk a little bit about that today.
Dan?
Dan Gardner. I'm founder and chairman of a company called Coding Theory, digital-first creative agency. About nearly 2,000 people, 50% engineering, 50% creativity. So it's truly the idea of where creativity and technology can solve problems, and we're in the business of change, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Awesome. And I'm also Dan. I'm Dan Shapiro, Chief Operating Officer of LinkedIn, and really excited to be here with all of you today. So let's start with the question of what's real and what feels like hype. If we're in the present, there's all this conversation about what's coming, but if you just look at what feels like it's working and what feels like it's not working yet, what are you seeing? Yeah, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, sure. On our team, we always talk about engagement, and being part of the conversation, really understanding what are the kind of emerging trends in AI. And so just the basic idea of interacting with a tool like Bard or Bing or ChatGPT, that first level of interaction is where I think you start to understand, I can do something with that. And in that moment, I feel like the possibilities are limitless. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think about hype, it's and we heard AI everywhere across the festival. But I think what a lot of people forget is AI is not new.
Right.
AI has been around for decades. When we think about video games, like Pac-Man has AI in it, and that's been around over 40 plus years. And you think about things like chatbots or Amazon, Alexa, and the smart home devices. Those have been around for a long time. And so I think what's interesting is going to be how people apply it. Like you were saying, really starting to experiment with some of the new technologies, but not forget that It's been around for a while. We've been using it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, with emerging technologies that catch the eye of the media, oftentimes what happens out of that is the idea that we like to call fake experts. And I think we're in a sort of era now where most of us are fake experts because we're all creating a hypothesis of what's to come. I mean, it's true that I think personalization and early video games, there are elements of AI. We're clearly in a new moment in time where it's transforming, where digital transformation now is a AI transformation. So out of that, you get a lot of topical stories and topical hype about what do I see now versus what is the infrastructure, especially from a B2B standpoint, the infrastructure that is the groundwork to stuff that we're going to see in the next 6, 12, 24, even 36 months out. So I think that's the separation of what I see of the sort of the real and, the not real, the fake.
Also, just to quickly build on that, what I love about this moment right now is John Maeda has this amazing theory on AI where he's you ever order a hamburger or fries and you get there and there's a ketchup bottle and you're like, oh, I just want some ketchup for this hamburger, and you're hitting it, nothing comes out. Take a knife, you're jabbing it, nothing comes out. And then all of a sudden, all this ketchup. That feels like what you're talking about with AI, but I really do believe it's this like crossing over of a threshold where accessibility and practicality, people can imagine how they would use it. That's the difference in this moment that makes it special.
And have you seen anything that in your work that has felt like the ketchup flowing out, like something you couldn't do yesterday that all of a sudden feels like you can do today?
100%. Like for us, one of the most kind of like tactical but very like practical things is just iteration. Being able to ideate, being able to swap things out, you know, having a partner, if you will, in AI, and then being able to take that and share it. One of our leading prototype experts, Alexia Dana, talks about how she enters all this information in, gets it back, and it helps her organize her thoughts and focus. And that speed, like that is something that I feel like you get over the what's it called, delaying that blank page and jumping in, and I think that's a big deal.
That's super cool.
I completely agree. Just being able to ideate, even with larger teams, and going into tools. So whether it is visually, like you were saying, or whether it's just copy or research, you know, really using AI as an amplifier. So.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is, you know, I think back to when I'm 7 years old, and you know, it's like you have certain skills. Even at 7, I like to, you know, draw something. I like to sing. I like to dance. I like to write something. And those people get put in this box of what people deem as creativity. It's a skill that they're deeming as creativity. And then oftentimes people maybe don't get that track in life because they didn't have what at the time was deemed a skill, and that's what defined creativity. What I think this does now is it actually levels the playing field, that creativity now is a discipline of how you think and solve problems. And how I see it is it now enables true creativity, not the skill set. It's the true creativity, which is just thinking, be disruptive, be inventive. And that's really where I see a huge difference. It's actually making people more creative because you're not boggled down by the skill anymore. You know, the ability of a skill, the ability is just the skill of thinking.
Yeah, so let's build on that for a second, because the conversation I've heard the most is if you ask people what's going to be the power of AI, a lot of the place you start is like, you know, it'll be easier to create content. It'll help us do our job more efficiently. Like the number one value prop that marketers talk about in many cases, we did this big survey, 2,000 respondents, what's your perspective on various trends in B2B marketing? And we'll share some of the link to the report so everyone can take a look at this. But you know, it really said, what do you think is the value prop of generative AI? And people said, you know, it's about efficiency, it's about workflow. What's your take on where efficiency comes from? And then let's take the flip side of that conversation, which is the other thing I'm hearing. What does it mean for the creative process? You know, do you get more creativity in a world of AI or less creativity if everyone's plugging their thoughts into an AI model? So let's start with where does efficiency come from in the process? And then let's jump to creativity.
Sure. Efficiency in terms of like task, you know, being able to manage your diary, being able to manage other people's diary, things that like just manually doing like task orientated things. You can spend more time on the thinking. I think there's that aspect. From a creative standpoint, I think it's really about, as you mentioned, and that enabler and equalizer. But I think what's important is you're going to actually have more creativity because it's going to inspire people to connect those dots that hadn't been uncovered before. So I really, like, for me, the part I'm most excited about is really having AI as that, I call it amplified assistance, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. Has anyone gotten to the point where there's a part of a campaign process that now is just way less time intensive than it was, you know, a month or 2 months ago? Like, have you had that experience yet?
In some ways, but I wouldn't fully validate that because I'm still processing candidly the entire field. Like, when I'm most optimistic about AI, I believe it fuels curiosity, which sparks that creativity you're talking about. My fear is that convenience will hurt curiosity, and then we'll all get on a track of seeing and doing the same things. Like, even with my personal life, I try to expand my personal data set by having as many diverse lived experiences as possible. Like, what happens when convenience slows down the desire to have more of those experiences? And so through AI, it could open that up. And like, you ask the right questions, you're more hungry for more, or it could like shut it down and make it a little bit like, this is really easy. I'm getting this feedback. I'm just going to do that thing that feels tried and true. So I'm still processing that question.
Fair enough. I think that's where efficiency creates the ability for actual creativity for differentiation, meaning if you're solely focused on how can you make this more efficient, you're basically removing all differentiation. And you'd be like naive not to use that. Like if it could do a task better, like, I think about accounting. QuickBooks comes out, okay, fine, I don't have to do physical bookkeeping anymore. It enables me to do it. But accountants still exist, but they could spend their time doing other things. And yeah, maybe some jobs got lost and some jobs got rearranged. And we're now in that. So if your sole way you look at this is about reduction, you're going to lose differentiation, versus if you also think about it as addition, that's a multiplication. So you're actually having a spread that happens between one business that's only on reduction and one business that's thinking about multiplication. That's huge differentiation, because the one things that the AI doesn't do, it's not inventive. It's still the human trait. So if you could use creativity and efficiency, you get something amazing. And you know what? There will be businesses that won't know that, and they'll be less creative, and they'll be less differentiated. And yeah, maybe short term they'll have some cost reduction, but
where does that go?
Where does that go?
Yeah. Well, there's a great campaign that we often talk about that was actually won an award last year here for Sherwin-Williams. And the whole idea is that there are architects all over the world that are trying to design houses, and they're trying to figure out what they should look like in the color scheme. And what Sherwin-Williams did is used AI to help them not describe the color in terms of like a name of a color, but like an emotion or a time of year or like summer breeze, and like what are the various colors. And it's the example that you gave, Dan, of using AI to help someone be creative in a way that felt like a barrier before, because you couldn't say what you wanted it to look like, but you could say the thing you wanted to bring into the experience. So that totally resonates.
Some of the work we've been doing is basically AI-powered virtual humans. And so we've actually done some work with InWorld, and you're actually able to create a personality. So do you want the person to be friendly, funny? Maybe they have like an odd tone. What are the different characteristics? And it's definitely like worth a play just to see what comes out there. One of the things we've also been working on is really talking about AI plus human powered. So we've actually been doing that with a lot of our clients right now. Everything from, say, customer support, where we're creating a bot, again, in that personality, persona, voice of the brand. But then also there's some negativity sometimes out there with bots. So having that human powered who can kind of jump in and get help from a support standpoint.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We had this conversation at LinkedIn sometimes of the historical model of service. Is like, if you ask what does service feel like, it's like a concierge, right? It's like you went to someone and that person could basically do whatever you needed, right? Like just help you. But my metaphor right now for service is, how fast can I get it done by myself? And then when I want someone to help me, how easy is it to get someone to help me? And I think that's like a pretty big flip. It's almost like, oftentimes you can define who's your best friend as the person that responds to you the fastest on text. It's just like that person's always there for you, right? Like when you need them. And I think it is a whole new model that AI can unlock for building service into brands and making that more accessible.
I agree with you, but I actually think it's more than that. And I think actually this is where most people look at what's happening with the experience side of AI from like a customer relationship, that everybody's focused on like this prompt. I need something, what could you do for me?
Yeah.
But I think that's backwards. I actually think it's the AI prompting you and being anticipatory to things, how they could be supportive in a proactive way. Because a real concierge knows what time you check in and you did a red eye and this and maybe restaurant, and like someone that really helps you, understands what you are and what you need. And different brands now have an opportunity to play on the strengths of what they are as a brand to be anticipatory in what we do. It's sort of like a different type of personalization. The Web 2 personalization is like, I'm going to retarget you, and I'm going to retarget you better, and hopefully I can connect it across different platforms. This is something way more than that, we really know you, and we're going to align our brand to you where it makes sense. And I think it's a different model from an experience standpoint. And everybody so focuses on, I want you to do this.
Yeah.
I just think it's backwards.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I also think that it really speaks to this idea of expectation setting. So when we think about like where the world goes and the human condition, if we can get to that point where it's not about an input, but more just that anticipation of delivering and meeting you where you are and knowing your experience, like that, I think is everything.
Well, and just as a prime example, coming to Cannes, right? I flew United. They anticipated and prepared me. We had a delay, but then I was also invited to the gate where they were going to have a reception. They let me know, where I needed to change planes, and I did not have to ask for anything. And I think airlines are doing it really well to just again be that concierge. But I think that's where the big opportunity is, even like from a B2B standpoint. How are we being proactive with our partners? How are we being proactive about any kind of training or education or sales channel training? How can we be more proactive about that?
So let's get really tactical for a second. Our research says that 3 out of 10 marketers say that they are very likely to start deploying AI into their process, in the coming months. If you could pick one place to start, just to get your toe in the water of using AI productively, in your craft, like where would you advise people to begin?
I mean, my advice is don't silo it. This is the great opportunity, and we've been talking about this for years. A brand is the sum of all its interactions, and that's both on the internal side from even a B2B, how it's relationships with other businesses, and anytime you touch anybody from an employee to a consumer. And I think the mistake right now is the siloing. Oh, I'm just going to do it here. The solution here is actually how to think holistically across the business. How do you enable your company to be more creative or be more effective or have a new type of relationship with the customer? I think it's a more holistic view, and I think that's the trap of going, oh, I'm just going to do a tiny little experiment here and not think that I'm actually transforming my business with this. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. Digital transformation is AI transformation. Transformation isn't siloed. That's the misconception of digital transformation. That's the misconception of AI right now.
So let me push on you for a second.
Yeah.
So, let's say that I'm new to this and I just want to get a win on the board. Something small, something that makes me feel like I can start my journey to then get to a holistic move. Like, if you were to give someone a place to start thinking about putting a win up, like, is there a place that you think that's more pragmatic?
Yeah, I think the win is a workforce that is serendipitously experimenting and using it from their day-to-day. There are the products out there for that to happen, whether it's the visual or the copy. Like, you don't need an infrastructure to do that right now, so any employee can be using it. But to think about an infrastructure win, and I just need a win, that's where marketers usually go wrong. That's where they think too short. This is a long play here. This is, if you want to do this, it's like just getting a win on the board. It's like playing tennis. I'm like, oh, I care about the game. It's no, you care about the match. That's what we're playing here.
One thing I would add to that, it's also looking at the areas of friction across the organization, whether internal or out, right? Is it how you're engaging with customers? Is it creativity? Is it how we come up with ideas? Is it how we do those tasks? Like, what are the different friction points, and start solving some of those problems. I think if you start with like, what problems can we solve, and build from there, it's another way to attack it.
And just to like kind of add to that, but a little bit of a more macro aspect of it is just like get to know the tool. Like, if you are great at your craft, traditional craft sense also works in innovation. So being able to just get to know it at your level, bring it into your process. I love the holistic point you're making. It's not just like, what is my AI win? It's like, how can I make the entire intention of my business win? And so, whether it's like a tactical thing of iteration and summarizing large amounts of data, or thinking about how is my experience more personalized to a customer, I think that's what it's all about. So,
have you, speaking of, getting involved in these products, using them, seeing what they do, seeing where they go awry. Have you had a moment where you were using ChatGPT or some other model where you saw something that just opened up a light bulb for you?
Oh yeah, and it actually just happened yesterday. Everyone thinks about when you work with AI, what it returns to you, and qualifying if it's good or not. And I was listening to a panel where one of the speakers said it's not always is what they returned good or bad. It's what's not there that I should have thought of, or makes me think differently. And the point about curiosity and the idea of like not being in the tactical but more strategic, those moments where it's like, oh, I should ask AI to ask me, what questions am I not asking? Like, that to me,
that's cool.
Is just like, and hearing that, the contagiousness of curiosity and inspiration makes me now approach it a little bit differently than I was just a day ago.
Yeah, I mean, you were kind of talking about that, Dan, right? It's like we're in a world of receiving from this, but I love the idea of the AI learning to figure out what's the next question to ask me so that I can unlock my own thinking, because that's what a great friend or mentor does.
Here's what I think about. If in a future, let's say 5 years from now, are we all just sitting in front of a screen with a prompt box? Is that really like what it means to be a workforce? I just don't think so. I think there's something more that can enable us to be creative and be effective in different ways. Like, and back to your question, like, why there's so much hype right now is because it's all so magical.
Yeah.
And we can all touch it, and that magic does facilitate creativity. It's like, wow. And it naturally creates like a wonder. Like for example, my 10-year-old son, he doesn't like writing or reading, but he loves going on ChatGPT and asking questions and creating these narratives that are coming in his head. Like, this unlocks something in someone who hates that. Like, that's not what he cares about. Like, so I see that in like just a 10-year-old kid. Like, if you can just channel that as like in business, it's incredible what it kind of unlocks and what you could do.
Love that. Val, have you had an aha moment using any of these tools? Just like, I can't believe that it can do this thing.
I'm just excited that it's so accessible. There's so many tools out there that are so accessible that you can kind of mix and merge and play with. For example, some of our work that we've had, it was our Dentsu Next Space work that we did with Microsoft and LinkedIn, but it's a virtual world, and we also had an AI-powered virtual human in there. But a couple of layers, we actually experimented with different AI tools to come up with those visuals. Like, what did a space look like? If we wanted to reimagine a space, we have like a whole DNA-shaped building that we created, and it was by putting in different plugs and prompts to see what was associated with the brand, what kind of inspiration is that going to have. And even with our AI-powered human, we named her Neva because she's all about the never before. And we created those different personalities. But we did all that like experimenting with just tools. They're available now to everybody.
I totally want to see a DNA-shaped building. That sounds amazing.
We'll show you after.
That sounds amazing. I mean, it really does paint a picture of the possibility. Let's go to the other side of the coin, which is definitely a topic of conversation around the responsibility that comes with, a tool like AI and the risks and what it means to do it well. Like at LinkedIn, one of the things we spend a lot of time thinking about is, anytime you use AI, does it introduce bias? Like, we are, as a platform, one of the largest labor markets in the world. People come in to create opportunity, to provide for their families, to like chart their careers. How do we make sure that every time that we're using AI, that's furthering equity as opposed to, introducing bias in the system? But it's clearly top of mind. I mean, if you look at the term, responsible AI, 40% of the people that are engaging on that term are VPs and above. It's like a very big C-suite topic. So just curious how you think about it, and for people that are trying to form their own opinions, how would you go about that?
Yeah, I think the way to handle this is we're dealing with data sets. The data sets clearly have bias based on historical challenges. So the only way to combat that is to evolve the data sets, whether it's like middle layers or other type of learning on top of it. And that's just going to happen. I mean, we're tools, although not exactly new, are still pretty immature. And there are going to be these issues. And right now, maybe you do need human components to like make sure that something doesn't go out. Like, that's just the reality. That's today's filter. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow's filter probably will be automated as well. And that's just the reality. Like, that's no different than coming up with a campaign and not thinking about biasy when it goes out, or like, what are the methods in an organization do you do to make sure that doesn't happen? So I think good organizations that understand that are going to be fine with AI that automates it, because they will think about those controls, because it's a control thing, to make sure it's there. I think that over time, it's going to be just naturally be fixed. I mean, bias is a thing that'll never actually be fixed, but it'll get to a place where you don't have the brand safety element of it can be mitigated. Not perfect, because there's no perfect solution here, but mitigation will exist, because if you can automate anything, you can automate that.
Yeah.
And that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity if you're a business. That's an opportunity for other businesses that are outside from B2B to put layers in control. So I think that's one of the things that when you work with immature technology, there's immature problems, and this is an immature problem.
Yeah.
So if you're responsible for a brand and using AI introduces some uncertainty, what is it going to say? What's the content that's going to be put out there? How do you think about, what managing the brand successfully means in a world where there is less control?
Well, I think branding has to be thought about differently. I mean, I believe that it had to be thought about differently anyway in an age of a digital-first world. Like, you're talking about behaviors, not just like emotions. It's emotions plus behaviors. So now there's even more lenses to that when you think, and you were talking a little bit about like how you think about the attributes that make up identity. Identity is a brand, identity is an individual. It almost becomes one and the same. I was just talking with a lot of athletes at Sport Beach talking about identity and sort of the extension of oneself. So I think there's going to be, I'm going to give an example. So at Code and Theory, we have something called the Words Up document that we created, and it's an open source thing. We have a link on our website, and the idea is to like constantly evolve this document about how words affect people in different ways. One thing we're looking about, how do we turn that into a learned system that can layer on? And that goes parts in the attributes, like how you speak, what you're allowed to talk about, how you use words. Those are all part of branding in the future.
Yeah. I just wanted to comment on something you said earlier, which is like my dream scenario where bias is mitigated. However, I haven't seen that in history without an active participation and transparency. And so when I think about this technology, even with the height of my most optimistic view, I do think there is a power shift where sometimes there is a desire by other forces for there to exist a bias. And so, so much of the work that we do that I find to be super important, not only for clients, but for society, is to encourage engagement. AI is not going away. And so it's so important for people to participate, learn, see what the edges are, be able to shape policy around it, and build those structures so that I don't know if bias will ever go away, but we could get closer to a place where it's actively understood and we're working against it effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will, if anyone's interested, at LinkedIn, we spend a bunch of time thinking about responsible AI. It's been a long part of our product roadmap. We have published some responsible AI principles. So if anyone's looking out there to build a perspective on how to start the conversation, sometimes looking at other people's work is useful, check out our responsible AI principles. I think it's a great starting point. Taj, I want to talk about trust.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's almost a build off this last conversation of responsible AI, because it feels like the role of trust takes on a new meaning in a world where, AI models that can feel like black boxes, they feel removed from your ability to really understand what's going on. So how do you think about trust?
I love this question, and the work that I do every day is about building experiences, because I personally, but then also as an academic, believe that experiences are where trust is made. And so when I think about the invitation, the engagement that's rewarding for an audience, a brand, a friend, a loved one, and that usefulness, that functionality, that ongoing relationship you build with them, that is everything. And so in that, I think great relationships or great experiences have really clear expectations and transparency. So when I think about AI, there's still so much that we're processing that we don't know. It's saying that, saying that this is what we know, this is what we don't know, and this is how your data may be used. Do you want to participate? Like, to me, that is where the greatest trust is, and that's what we build into our products, services, ideas every day.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'll share you my theory on this, which I'm curious if anyone has a reaction to. I think that the most prevalent AI interface right now is chat, right? And there's almost a sense of you're having a conversation with someone. And the question is, how comfortable are you sharing what you need and what you think and what you want with this interface? And I think that the word, if I were a brand, that I'd want to be associated with is my. Like, it's my AI. Like, meaning that whatever's on the other side of that discussion is like loyal to me as a person, is going to abide by what I care about and what I need. And I think that there's really a mix out there in the world of which brands feel like my and which brands feel like other, because you don't share your most intimate needs or like, you know, what you're trying to accomplish with, you know, someone that doesn't have that trust on the other side. So I think there's the real like moment that's going to happen of which brands feel like they're you and which brands feel like, you know, detached.
Look, I don't think loyalty, you're talking about loyalty in some way. That trust is loyalty.
Like intimacy.
Intimacy. But I think people want to think that about themselves, but I don't think they actually behave that way. People share data very easily. Some of it, they don't know that they're sharing data. And some of it, they kind of know at this point.
Yeah, it's a transaction.
Yeah, and they do it. But like, they just do it. So I think we all want to think that, but I just don't think that, sadly or not sadly, depending how you look at it, is it. I think trust becomes something, it evolves. I mean, look, trust is always the same. It's like I have a relationship with you. I know you're not going to be perfect, maybe, you know, but you're not going to do wrong by me.
Right.
You're just going to try your best not to do wrong by me. You mentioned humility. If you screw up, you tell me. And brands, you know, what AI does, it makes it feel more human. That's kind of the problem with the bias and all that. It feels, but it's not like human. It isn't human. So when it doesn't do what it maybe should do, and it's a different form of transparency, is partially how is it getting the data and where's the like, all the stuff coming from, and the other part is sort of transparency on perfection or their lack of. And I just think back to branding is a new thing. It's a living thing. It will become a living thing. The same way we humans are actually living things. If it's going to mirror the behaviors of a human, it's going to have to mirror the bad things, which is mess up, and have the ones that we all strive for, like humility. Like you're going to have to think in that context. But loyalty is loyalty. Like there's brands historically we all love. There's brands we all hate. Like the AI doesn't change that. It's just whether you're good at doing that or not.
Well, and I think for the brands you love, that is where you're going to have that trust. You are going to be more open, you know, if there's a bot coming up and it's from a brand you love, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, I got this question, you know, and you'll just sort of plug it in. If it's a brand you're like, I don't really know about this brand. I don't know if I want to put my data in there. So, and I love that what you said about loyalty too. Some of the things that we've been doing, we really see anything, whether it's a chat bot or any experience like that, it's part of the brand. It's an extension of the brand.
Yeah.
It needs that voice. And like from a design perspective, we say conversational design and experiences, and we really like approach it that way.
Yeah.
By the way, the other thing is technology solving that as well. I mean, I'm a believer technology could solve things, and it's not just responsibility. So like, I know Web3, for example, is not the du jour topic anymore at Cannes. You know, that was last year's topic du jour. But there were ideas there, whether the technology was right or wrong, but the philosophy of I can control my own identity, and I own my identity, and I can make it more clear on that transaction of when I give identity, and I could also maybe even be anonymous, but use my identity to actually round out the value that I want to get from that. That could be solved by technology, whether it's blockchain or not. Like there are other ideas around that where I still have some control. That is a business opportunity. Those things will be solved. So where there are problems, there are business opportunities for solutions. So I don't think it's all on the user either. I don't think it's all the responsibilities on a company trying to take advantage of this. It's just other companies coming up with new solutions to solve some of this. And I do think technology will probably solve the identity ownership of data problem as well.
Yeah, I also think that's the role of humans, like to be great coaches and stewards of translating those virtues to technology. So, for sure.
Well, Val, I want to jump into something that I know you've been working on around personalization, and I think I'm personally very bullish about this being one of the big unlocks in AI. And I'll tell you my personal experience. So I went to ChatGPT when it first came out, and I just asked the prompt, give me some career advice, okay? And it sort of gave 5 or 6 bullets that you might expect if you went to a speech where there was a lecture about this sort of best practices in your career. So then what I did was I went and I cut my LinkedIn profile data and I dropped it into the prompt, and I said, given this is who I am, can I have some career advice? And it shifted from what felt like receiving a lecture to what it feels like when someone that knows you is really trying to figure out how to give you a perspective. And it opened a window into how much we can personalize experiences if we have some context about people. So I'd just love to hear how you're thinking about personalization, the role you think it can play.
Well, I love that. It looks like you have a new LinkedIn product on the move here, the LinkedIn Career Coach. So, hey, there's that.
Product team, if you're looking, this is a good idea.
We can work together on that. But no, personalization is so important. I mean, we really approach it as where's the friction? Like, where's the friction, and how can we, and you said the word concierge earlier as well. How can we ease that? And so some of the work that we've done, actually I have 3 examples that are important for this topic. One is our Dentsu Next Space, and that's what we created in collaboration with LinkedIn, with Head Office Space and Microsoft. And I touched on some of those examples earlier where we were using AI's inspiration, where we were using tools like InWorld to create Neva and her personality along the way. And then what that brings is we were tailoring those experiences for the B2B audience. So how can we take that information, create a space, and we call it like a virtual playground where we can work with brands to do ideation, or we can work with brands to see how we're playing out those AI characters. So whether it's from a sales training perspective, whether it's from immersive learning, people don't just want to watch like a video anymore. How can we create a little bit of play and interactivity tailored to their experiences? Another one, we actually, we worked with Disney, and we created this thing called the bot office. Okay. So it was all about alleviating the friction of buying movie tickets. And so it was all about a couple of the Marvel movies that came out, but you could actually just interact with it, boom, and get your ticket, have engagement with the content on the spot. Awesome. And then lastly, from a AI visual standpoint, we did some work with Kroger on the chef bot. So we know there's a lot of waste with food. People buy a lot of food, there's a lot of waste. So the idea with this one was like, hey, look at the food you have available, boom, what kind of recipes can you come up with?
So, everyone's got that problem, right? That, like, you open up the fridge, like, what are we gonna eat? Yeah.
So really, ultimately, that personalized experience is created from friction. Yeah. So friction's the igniter. Let's solve that.
Love that. One thing that I'm curious if you all have had this experience, that the thing that was an aha moment for me is how good the new AI models are at translation. Mm-hmm. It's hard, right? It's hard, particularly, like, we have a global platform. We want it to be as inclusive as possible, which includes lots of languages. But, historically, automating translation was pretty hit or miss. Like, you got to something that was okay, and then you had to, make sure people reviewed it, make sure it was sort of culturally aware. The new AI models are pretty incredible at translating content. And one of the things that's cool about that from our perspective is it means that anyone, anywhere on our team can help produce content for any market in the world in a way that really wasn't possible before. And so it just opens up all sorts of possibilities around, like, how your team can be distributed, which also means you having your team in more markets to be more empathetic for your users, but then contribute globally. Like, it's just, for me, was a big unlock.
What's really interesting about that is, how it used to be is like you would make that one version and then give it to the markets. Someone would manually translate it, and to make it specific to that market, and then having to multiply that by different markets. So as we were talking about earlier in the conversation about, like, alleviating those tasks, like operationalize that. I mean, that's like a accelerator right there, but then still being able to tweak the copy and add that creative.
Yeah, but here's where I think it's interesting. Everything that we just talked about is how to make it more efficient on how we did it before. Sure, that's going to happen. That's what's happening now. But you can imagine a world where you actually, again, back to the sort of, it's anticipatory. It feels kind of antiquated. Again, I'm going to go into the future right now to look back and go, oh, us creative agencies, what we did is really smart data, and then we like figure out how to globalize it, and then we like tweak the copy because maybe it could work better, and we're going to change the art and do a new photo shoot. That feels pretty antiquated, because in the future, you know what, when you know who I am, you could generate the stuff, you could generate the visual, you could generate words. It's actually created and it's temporal for me. That's personalization. It's actually value on demand. So we're currently right now solving yesterday's problem in the most efficient way. We know of yesterday's problem, the way we've solved it. But if we really want to think about the future and where this is going, it's totally different. We solve it completely different. We think about these things. Yes, of course, use case, industry after industry after industry. It's the same thing we've been doing since 2001 when I started Code and Theory. Good UX is remove friction, how to make something more efficient. But traditionally, for the last 23 years, since 2001, 22 years when I started this, we did it off structured data in old school ways to actually try to reach people. The information architecture did this way because that's the way it was stored in a database. We're now unhinged from that. We don't have to think about it. We can semantically access information in a totally different way. And we don't have to create content the way we did. I don't have to think of it. I have to just think about the attributes, the value that my product or service can do. And then that value will be created on demand when people need it at the right time, on the right place, on the right device, and the right experience. That's probably what the future is. So all these things that we're talking about and we do, which we're going to continue to do, we're doing it at Code and Theory, we're using it unimaginably across all the creative outputs we do. But that's a stopgap to the long-term infrastructure that we're putting in that actually just totally changes the way we communicate and we do these things and we be creative in a different way.
I love this conversation so much because you match that passion with your initial question of creating more inclusivity and accessibility, and then the possibilities are endless. And so, to everyone that's watching and taking this in, when those questions come up, the energy of Dan being it could be bigger, but at the same time thinking about this is the doorway to bringing more people into what we're doing is what I think AI proposes.
Well, maybe bringing together what you and Val were talking about earlier about UX, one of the use cases that just inspires me is, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella was giving a presentation about the power of AI, and he talked about a citizen of India in a rural area that spoke one of the multitude of dialects and wanted to get government services. And it was really hard because, finding it in his language and the way that he felt comfortable with. So they basically created a chatbot that allowed him to figure out how to access and get government services in his local village. And for me, that's where democratization of the world's capabilities, in local language and inclusive way, that to me is just it's a North Star on some level.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's amazing about that is, I often think the role of government, is to be there and give support to its people.
Yeah.
And you think about the innovation of digital capabilities and digital first government just lacks. It just isn't there. Even as simple as something getting a driver's license. It's crazy. So this has the opportunity to really do more. So government could truly do more to actually help people in unimaginable ways, is the way you just explained. And I think it could extend to many different ways. Obviously extend to education as well. It's it should be an equalizer to education, hopefully, and how you can reach people and you can access things and learning from different countries and look windows into different cultures and get different perspectives. It is all of the above. And that's what's exciting about it. And so the future will be different than today, which was different than yesterday. There are some scary elements in that, and there's some really incredible elements to that who knows what life is like and what we do, but it doesn't necessarily, just because what we're familiar with today is different, doesn't mean it's going to be horrible.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe we close on a very simple question. Let's benchmark ourselves, 1 to 10. In 10 years, when we come to the Cannes Lions Festival and we think about how different everything we do is now that AI is launched. If 1 is you know what, like, it's pretty much what it was. Yeah, we found a few things here and there, but basically we're running the same process. And 10 is everything that we thought we knew about how to do this discipline is now backwards or upside down. Like, put a number on the scale. Like, how do you feel about it?
Maybe I'll set the table. I'm saying
Yeah.
10 because I am so excited about. I have a 12-year-old daughter, Stella, and the way that she learns today is radically different than the way I learned.
Yeah.
And it's with today's technology. So when you think about 10 years out, where it will be, meeting young people with their needs and their interests and their curiosity, if it goes into the right place, I think everything will be different.
Yeah. What do you think, Val?
Yeah, 10. I mean, I think definitely, I'm a technology optimist.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I think there's just so many opportunities. And I loved what this whole group said just about humility, being open, being honest about like what's possible, what's not. Hey, this is a little quirky over here, but this is where we're taking it, whether it's to accelerate education, like healthcare. We didn't even touch on healthcare. You know, think about how much we could accelerate wellness for people. So again, I'm with you. I'm like,
10.
like
Right,
we can bump
do
it to like a 12 maybe. I don't know. Can we make it a 12?
Come on, Dan.
I'm going to go opposite.
Let's judge.
I'm not going to go full opposite. I'll give it around a 7 or 8.
Okay.
The reason is obviously, clearly, I'm excited about like being totally inventive and think that things will definitely change and be definitely different. But typically with emerging technology, especially ones that are immature with such potential, it's nothing that we're trying to invent now is what it is. It's like something totally different, and things that we thought would change actually didn't change and remain the same. And people still like certain in real life things, and maybe that doesn't go away, or maybe it does, because my kids love Roblox and love being in these different universes. We don't know, so I'm not going to give it a 10, not because I don't think it will be, just because.
It feels a little bit like The Price is Right. Like I feel
Exactly. I can only win.
$1.
I can only $1. I give it a 1. I can only win on this prediction when we look back in 10 years. Yeah.
Well, I'll round it up with mine. I think I'm a 6, and you know what is very clear to me is I agree with so many things that all of you have said, that there are so many parts of how we do this job and how we manifest the brand identities and help people discover the products and services they love. Like, I think so much of that's going to change. But I'm really colored by this story that I heard yesterday. So we did a review of one of the most successful branding campaigns of all time, which was the MasterCard campaign, right? It's like there are some things money can't buy, and for everything else, there's MasterCard. And what I learned about that story was prior to them launching that, there was a huge debate at the company, and the data and the analysis said that that was not a good idea. And it was essentially a couple people that was like, I don't know what it is, but this moves me. There's an insight about people that this brings forward what people are gonna remember. And until the AI can do that, there's just so much that starts with that idea that I think is so much of what this discipline is all about. And then we take that like insight and we manifest it in the world in an inclusive way, an extensive way to make it easy for people. And I think AI can play in a massive role. So I think I'm a 6.
It goes to creativity is true creativity. It's
Yeah.
thinking, it's instinct, it's judgment. That's inventiveness.
Yeah.
That doesn't change. That is uniquely human.
Yeah,
That's
people feel
uniquely human.
seen. People
Yeah.
feel understood, Anyway.
Human powered. I have a last question.
Yeah.
So who won the Showcase Showdown?
We'll have to come back in 10 years,
Yeah, okay.
and we'll see.
I think I said 6 to 7, so I got the prices right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm staying with my 10. I'm with you.
Yeah.
You're in
Same.
10.
I'm 10.
In 10. Great. Well, Taj, Val, Dan, thank you for joining me. To everyone who tuned in, thanks for joining. Dan Shapiro, Chief Operating Officer of LinkedIn, and just thrilled to have had a chance to talk about what everyone is talking about and share some of our thoughts. Have a great day.